So Notes Towards a Digital Workers Inquiry offers first-hand accounts from the tech sector's resurgent labor movement as artificial intelligence gains ground in every facet of their lives. Previously thought to be unorganizable, these workers are a part of a North American movement that is reaffirming faith in collective revolutionary action through new methods of organizing, new ways of association, and a new synthesis of traditional labor activities with original research. To capture this growing class consciousness, the Capacitor Collective conducted 10 interviews with platform workers and organizers whose efforts align traditional motives with new tactics in a text that shakes up the worker inquiry tradition and imagines new ways to produce knowledge with and for the labor movement. So my name is Tori. I'm a member of the Socialist Project and the Leo School, and I also had the pleasure of working on this book. I was a copy editor and also had an interview in there, and it was a real pleasure to work on this book, so I'm happy to be able to MC and help bring this book launch to Toronto. So with that said, we can turn it over to the panel, who will introduce themselves, and they'll each speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will move to Q&A. So without further ado, who would like to go first?
Hello everyone, Enda, Brophy, and I teach at Simon Fraser University.
Hi, Alessandro Delfanti, and I teach at the U of T here in Toronto.
Karmah, Dudin. I've worked at Amazon for a long time. I don't currently work there, and I'm still around the organizing efforts.
I'm Andrew Doe. I'm with the Tech Workers Coalition Canada chapter.
Hi, I'm Chen, teacher here at the U of T.
Thank you everyone for coming to this launch, and thank you also to the Leo School and to the Digital Labor Working Group for organizing this event. I thought I'd begin by giving a little bit of context for the collaboration which led to this book. Since about 2019, our group has been engaged in an ongoing discussion on the relationship between research and organizing. And especially as relates to the forms of work which scholars have taken to calling digital labor. And of course now we know that big tech has tremendous power in the field of knowledge production, and we know how it tries to influence research agendas in many ways, including by buying off academics, even those who have been among its critics. And as communication scholars based in the neoliberal university over the past couple of decades, we really witnessed an explosion of research on digital labor. And while we're happy to see the efforts of so many colleagues drawn to what is a really crucial area of social life, we also found in our discussions that we had some pretty serious questions about the way that some of this research has unfolded. And specifically, a lot of this research appeared to us as fairly apolitical and even extractive in its nature, with researchers going into labor communities or interviewing labor organizers, extracting knowledge from those interviews, taking it away to academic settings where they presented them to academic colleagues at expensive conferences that weren't attended by anyone other than academics, or published it behind paywalls. So our motivation for this project as scholars who have been involved in labor organizing was really it came from a desire to offer a more sustained reflection on how our research and our resources can actually support worker organizing. And the questions we found ourselves returning to were, how can we focus our knowledge production so that we can better understand the way that platforms have restructured work, so that workers can better connect and organize and hit capital where it is going to inflict the most damage. And the context for these discussions was, of course, a really unprecedented surge in worker organizing all along the digital value chain, from engineers to contract tech workers, content moderators, virtual gig workers, food delivery and rideshare platform workers, e-commerce, warehouse workers, and more. And the book comes out of our ongoing collaborations and research and organizing with the workers and organizations who have been a part of that really remarkable, pretty much decade-long pushback against big tech. Now, there are a number of theoretical traditions and reference points that are available for this kind of project, ranging from action research through community engaged research to feminist standpoint theory and other approaches. But the one which has had the greatest influence for us is worker inquiry, which along with other scholars we are aiming to rethink as digital worker inquiry. As we suggest in the book, digital worker inquiry isn't a methodology, but it's a political orientation toward the production of knowledge from below. It can be formal, it can be informal, it can be systemic, it can be ephemeral, but it always begins from labor struggles, letting the resistance and the organizing of workers set the research agenda. And I think that if we wanted to summarize worker inquiry in a nutshell, we could say that it's a practice of bringing research and organizing together as closely as possible, sometimes to the point where the research becomes organizing and organizing becomes research. So our analysis in this essay is informed by the set of conversations that happens that are take up the second part of the book, which gathers 11 interviews conducted with labor activists involved in organizing at e-commerce, software production, delivery and ride-hailing, and other tech companies. And before I hand off this talk, I want to share a quick example of one of these research collaborations that we discuss in the book, which is with the Alphabet Workers Union. The union is supported by the Communication Workers of America and has been controversial among some organizers at Alphabet, Google. We can get into a discussion of that later if you want. But I think that the AWU is a really important union effort, especially in that its goal is to organize all workers at Google in a wall-to-wall organizing principle, including both full-time employees, so directly employed Google workers, and its massive shadow contractor workforce, which it's almost impossible to get exact numbers, but I think the last precise, more or less reliable numbers about that workforce put it at about 135,000 workers, which is larger than Google's in-temp or in-house workforce. This is a massive workforce of hyper-exploited temps, vendors, and contractors who are often making like $18, $19 an hour in the US. And so a really critically important workforce that big platforms all depend on and which are mostly not acknowledged. So in 2022, the AWU had conducted a survey of Google's TVCs, ingeniously using the company's internal communication channels to reach TVCs, and had gotten 1,800 responses, which is a pretty good result. We helped gather and present the data, which showed not only the huge difference in pay, benefits, and working conditions between full-time employees and contractors, but also, importantly, that these differences were present among contractors at those firms, and were very much structured according to race, gender, sexual orientation, and ability. So to give you a sense, on average, racialized temps reported making nearly 10% less than their white counterparts. LGBTQIA2S plus vendors reported making 15% less than their straight colleagues. Vendors with disabilities reported making 18% less than their able-bodied coworkers, and older temps reported making 10% less than their younger counterparts. And this is just one example of the data that we found. At any rate, this information then became a resource and a weapon that temps could use in their organizing. We also produced a detailed corporate overview of one of Google's biggest contractors called Cognizant. This is a company, a global company that employs around 300,000 temps worldwide and makes roughly, makes nearly $1 billion a year off Google in contracting. This information was used by a group of Cognizant workers in Texas who then unionized through the AWU. That unionization campaign went very well. Unfortunately, it didn't end well, and we can talk about that as well. But not only was this research useful to TVCs who were organizing, but engaging with them raised the importance for us of this massive subsector of the tech industry, which provides temp workers to the biggest platforms in the economy. So very important and strategic access for labor organizing in tech. And with that example, I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm here with the Tech Workers Coalition Canada. I actually see a couple of members in the audience, so it's great to see you all in person because a lot of us do organize virtually. I'm actually don't live in Toronto anymore. I come from a place down south. I live in Chicago actually, which is basically America's Toronto. People in Chicago don't like it, but it's true. But anyways, so I can probably bring two perspectives on this. One is I can bring the Tech Workers Coalition Canada, and I actually think this is a good segue into that, which I'll talk about. But I also am with a company called Nava United. I'm swagged out in union merch right now because we are one of the few remote companies that is a software, when we think of like software, like tech companies, software engineers, product managers, customer success managers, a wall-to-wall union that is affiliated with the other big international communication workers of America's one. The other one is OPIU, which is the Office Professional Employees International Union, where we voluntarily won recognition end of 2022. I was part of bargaining our first contract. So I can talk a lot about that. We're affiliated with the local OPIU 153, which is the same local as Kickstarter United, which was the first tech company that actually won a collective bargaining agreement. They just secured a 32-hour, 4-day work week and went on the longest remote strike, a 42-day strike, won a 4-day work week. That is a historic protection, so very proud of them. And we also have Sesame Street in our local, which is always a fun fact. But anyways, let me actually talk about the Tech Workers Coalition Canada. I'm a designer researcher by trade, who right now flexes in as a product manager, which probably more than I would like. And I'll start a little bit about TWC, the Tech Workers Coalition Canada. So the book actually interviews a couple of people that are affiliated with the Tech Workers Coalition. The Canadian chapter, I would say, is a bit more nascent and new. We sort of reactivated last summer. We kind of took over this event called Toronto Tech Week, which is, a very investor-forward tech conference. And we were like, and clearly the vetting was like done by AI. So if they saw what we wrote, they wouldn't have accepted it, but they did. And we had like a little annual bocce tournament. We have our first annual bocce winner right here. So no, that was honestly just a fun way to get a lot of people out to this. And through that, we actually were able to have a organizing committee. So I will say at the stage that we're in, I would love to hear from other organizing committee members. They might disagree with my assessment, but I will say we're doing the foundational work of like doing governance, like what does it mean to be a member? What does it mean for collective decision making as a group? So that's kind of the stage we are at. A lot of us are, I would say, like when you think of your tech workers, you're kind of white collar tech workers, software engineers or designers, product managers as well. But to kind of go back to the book, a little bit about the Tech Workers Coalition, and then I can kind of zoom in on the Canadian chapter of this. So the book mentioned one of the original organizers of it. It did kind of actually begin with a wall-to-wall solidarity. Specifically at Google, where cafeteria workers were going through their own unionization efforts. They were not Google workers, they were contractors and vendors, and they were affiliated with Unite Here, which works with a lot of kind of like cafeteria workers or fast food workers, and I think hotel workers too, I believe. And they actually invited a software engineer to be like, hey, come to one of our union meetings. And the software engineer was very much like inspired by like, wow, I had no idea that the working conditions of being a cafeteria worker at Google, I get fed by you, it sucks, and like, what can I do as a software engineer? And when cafeteria workers did a walkout, a couple of Google software engineers did a walkout. In the US, because of the Taft-Hartley Act, it is illegal to do a solidarity strike. And so these Google workers were disciplined. I believe a couple of them did end up being fired, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind of very much the origin story of the Tech Workers Coalition. And it's sort of, and just the idea of like us as like, even the idea of tech worker, like the notion of where we talk about this in our own chapter. We're doing quite a bit of book clubs where like the question of like, what does it mean to be a worker in tech, where we, especially where we do kind of occupy a bit of a contradictory class position, like our compensation is literally equity and stocks in the company. Like we own like we have capital, that is part of our compensation. Like right? And even just management in tech, like I mentioned, product management is a job title. I don't manage anyone. Customer success managers, and management, oftentimes people don't really want to become managers. They sort of have to become, or you get fired. So like, even just the idea of like, what does it mean to be management in tech company? So these are kind of like questions we're sort of contending with right now. But anyways, Tech Workers Coalition expanded to a lot of different cities as well. There used to be a Bangalore chapter. There was a London chapter that actually evolved, and Montessori, keep me honest, I believe they evolved into the United Tech and Allied Workers, I believe, which is the explicit organizing arm of the UK's equivalent of Communication Workers of America, which I think is the Communication Workers Union. So they actually kind of matured to be an explicit organizing arm to organize tech workers, mostly a focus on like Apple retail workers and TikTok content moderators where they have a campaign. Kind of what Tech Workers Coalition, and this is kind of like the value and ethos that we believe in, is that, you know, tech workers are workers in the very classical sense of like our relationship to production. We are, even though our compensation structure can sometimes put us in really contradictory class positions, but that's kind of a fundamental belief that we have, that it is possible to organize the workplace through developing worker organizing. As someone who's organized a 100% remote workplace, it is hard. You don't have that face-to-face in-person interaction. The flip side is they have no idea that you're doing it because you're remote. So that's kind of a, so there is that element. We do believe in wall-to-wall unions. That's the origin story of Tech Workers Coalition, is a software engineer making, you know, $400,000 a year or whatever, doing a solidarity walkout with a cafeteria worker making $18 an hour, if not less. But honestly, a lot of what we've kind of come and a lot of the early things we talked about as a group is like, I work in tech, I feel crazy. Am I the only person who see what's going on here? Like, it's nuts. Seeing, and Canada's not immune to this, like the big tech in Canada is Shopify. And if we all hear what Toby, Lukey, and whatever are saying, these are the people that have a political project and a vision, and we work with a lot of people there that are all like rah-rah the company, and you kind of feel alone. So a lot of what we talk about is just trying to find each other and not feel like we are losing our mind. Like, we see what's going on, right? And that's a lot, actually that's a lot of the value right now, that when we talk to a lot of people, like how do they find about us, what do they like about us, is the fact that they have found like a place where it's like, I can finally like not have to keep my guard up and have real talk with other tech workers. Sure, we don't work together, but who knows, maybe through this we might find someone who works in our same workplace and potentially organize our workplace and potentially do a union drive. And Tech Workers Coalition is trying to be a political home. A lot of what we have done so far has been like a lot of book clubs. We did a book reading of, you know, Jane McAlevy's No Shortcuts, your classical text on workplace organizing. We did a film screening of Union, which by the way, one of the filmmakers is a Torontonian, so that's kind of cool. So right now it's a lot of political education, but at the current moment, Tech Workers Coalition Canada is trying to figure out, really doing a lot of the foundational infrastructural work of like, what does it mean to make a collective decision as a group? What does it mean to be a member? And how can we, and what does it mean to be like in community with each other? Like that's really kind of where we are, and it's been really nice to make a lot of friends that way, and people have made friends that way, and I think that's worth doing. And like, sure, we aren't doing campaigns to organize a workplace yet, but the hope is that at some point in the future, like maybe you work at this place and now you meet someone else who works at this place. We now know we can now vet each other, like, okay, I can actually organize with you and I feel safe, because that is the number one thing in organizing, is you have to trust who you are organizing with. You don't organize alone. So that's kind of what Tech Workers Coalition Canada right now is about.
Okay, hello. Yeah, so like I've mentioned, I'm Karmah. I've worked at every kind of Amazon facility that's existed out there for a minute. Started working there in 2019. No longer work there, but still around the organizing efforts. I think the thing I want to start with is, I don't know, people have heard about Amazon a lot and the efforts around it and the importance of it. I think I will reiterate why it's extremely important. And then I think I'm going to go into kind of some of like a strategic orientation and our current strategic orientation to it, give a bit of an overview of that, how we've reached that, where research has been extremely critical, and how we've gone to some of those conclusions. I'll be brief, I won't go into every single detail. And then also talk about a little bit of how we've reached these conclusions and our approach to research. But yeah, to start on just the importance of Amazon, obviously it's a household like, staple name now. Everybody knows that. People think that's kind of the main reason it's important to organize. I probably don't have to say this to a group of people that are research oriented, but of course it goes way beyond that. Logistics as an industry is obviously blowing up in the West especially. It's where like mass amounts of workers are today. If we want to see the labor movement kind of get back on its feet, logistics is important, and Amazon is obviously leading on that front completely. And it's this behemoth that's getting into everything. And that is really innovative. Like, I'll say someone who's worked there for a minute, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of love it. It's impressive, you know, in there, and like the capacity of what thousands of workers can do when they're in there is truly impressive. There's a lot of sort of, and understandably of course, moralizing around the sort of same day, next day delivery, and that is true. It is off the blood, sweat, and tears of workers, but it's also just extremely impressive capacity that is possible by that kind of collective labor. And when you see it as like upfront, as I have, and even if you're just around it, you really start to understand what potential power exists within that industry and what it could mean to really organize Amazon workers on a mass scale. The movement, I think, is still very much in its infancy, even though it's developed. It's, you know, people have probably heard about the Teamsters in the States. Things are moving, but it really is still very much in its beginnings, and we're talking about 1 million workers like just across North America. That in and of itself is like a political force that will change, honestly, the labor movement and probably history, you know, once organized one day. But yeah, like in taking on this behemoth and in taking on this union struggle, understanding the company and really having a real proper understanding of how it works is obviously very, very crucial. That's kind of how you have to develop strategy. And I think through, again, our sort of work with research and with researchers who have been helping us out from the very beginning, we've come to some, I would say, kind of two massive strategic considerations that I would say are kind of unique and definitely contested in the movement. I don't know how aware people are of the nitty-gritty, but typically, because it's such a big target, a lot of people want to focus in on the choke points, on the small places where you can do the most amount of damage with the least amount, where of the thinking that actually being in the big places is extremely important. And I'll just give a quick example there of why and how research was very important in coming to that conclusion. It could seem, again, very obvious. You have a small amount of resources and it's this big place, you go to the smaller places. Our kind of political orientation was we have to go to where the mass amount of workers are, and we need to learn how to organize them. even if we don't have the capacity, we need to learn how to do that. And research has kind of corroborated that by actually showing the importance of the FCs and showing the FCs are the big facilities of Amazon, and showing that that's actually how Amazon is able to continue expanding. There's a whole really good research report by Steve Marr and Scott Aquino. I won't go into the details, but you guys should check it out. It's very, very impressive research report. The other kind of strategic point is on the question of disruption versus kind of all-out strikes. You need to, because of the redundancy at Amazon, being able to be kind of randomly disruptive is a much more useful and effective strategy than just kind of going on these big all-out strikes that we see, right? That's another kind of contested strategy, but that's another thing that research has helped us really get to. I think the more interesting point, maybe, of the thing I want to say now is how we've managed to come to these conclusions that I think are pretty sophisticated and detailed, and it's through a particular kind of approach to research, I think. We're just talking about, right, like how research historically has been sort of extractive. You see some academic that comes in, wants to write a paper, blah, blah, blah. That is real, and that has happened. But I think there's a thing that happens where an overcorrection sort of happens, and an inverse happens, where a researcher will come in and be like, what do you want, organizer? I will, and it's like, that's not useful either. So I think a genuine, sort of relationship where, fine, yes, the organizing is primary. That is the thing that's going to move things forward. You get a certain view, but a researcher being a real researcher that wants to do their work, wants to push you on your strategy, wants to actually, that is the thing that is helpful, and that sort of dialectical tension is honestly what produces really good strategy, which is necessary. We need that kind of thing today. We're talking about a defeated labor movement, honestly, and these struggles and challenges in front of us that are really big, and we really need every kind of aspect, organizers and researchers, academics, to be putting in all of their capacity and challenging each other on this stuff in a real way. I think that's where I'll end it off. I'll also say with that, if we are obviously looking for people all the time, so if you're a researcher who's interested in thinking about Amazon and helping us out, please reach out. I'll be around right after. And if you know anyone who wants to potentially work there, or if you potentially want to leave your research job and go work at Amazon, also please come find me. Thank you.
Well, I will keep brief, I guess. I will talk about how this digital labor inquiry starts with a very simple premises, which is how workers generating or the generation of grassroots knowledge about system, about their digital conditions, and in the search for solidarity comes very organic in workers' daily life. Because first of all, they have very embodied experience with how system works, including its failure, stupidity, glitches, and all the opaque systems that usually kept hidden from the customers, and in the PR materials, this and that. So in this coalition or method, we call it digital labor inquiry. This is the premises, the starting point that we build our knowledge, build solidarity and collaboration together. And on a very broad level, the opacity, or how we always look at the digital system as some kind of like a black box, the opacity is a structural and systematic challenges. Because first of all, workers are being kept as individual workers, automized in many ways. For platform-based workers, they don't know each other. It's kind of like very difficult. And the examples for both platform workers and more increasingly for those working for machine learning models, like feeding data into them, the challenges are also lies into the fact that the algorithms and the rules are constantly changing. So basically, like tracing a moving target. So then that brings back to the point that sharing knowledge, sharing experience with this purposefully built opaque system comes very natural in the workers' experience. So that's why we have seen basically across sectors the common use of social media to share, to take screenshots of how much money you earn, especially for the platform workers, drivers, food delivery workers. And they also use online forums, again, basically for information sharing, and also for mobilization. And it goes beyond that, then we will see organizations such as Rideshare Drivers United from the United States. They would start to build up the research in terms of getting into the bottom of, for instance, how much wage that they actually learn as a group of workers. So they will develop research methods to actually study that, so that they can basically have their own report saying this is how much we learn based on surveys, and later on they actually will have some technological innovations in terms for data collection. So that actually all builds off for later campaign, especially for lobbying against all the lobbies done by the big tech in terms of saying, oh, they actually, the wages that drivers earn are way above the minimum wage. And the same technique was also picked up by the Ride-Fair Coalition here in Toronto. They were using similar techniques to do a research for the use for the 2023 to 2024 campaign for fighting against the Uber's lobbying. So basically, I think confronting this thing is, or the rationality, the opacity of the tax systems, as well as the management, for the sake of deconstructing the ways in which that they work together to ensure capital's domination. It's workers' knowledge and practices basically debunk the fact that automation is going to replace workers whatsoever. And the way that workers actually build their knowledge would also lead to grassroots tech innovations. I will talk very briefly from the interviews that we included in the book, which is from China. Well, we would actually imagine, and it is true, authoritarian regime, they have all the digital surveillance and suppression technologies in the government's hands, but the workers were still able to appropriate social media along with some kind of, sometimes it's illegal software, for the sake of building their own solidarity and among themselves. So I think these grassroots tech innovations, it's kind of like it's mirroring what's also happening across North America and elsewhere. So I think this is, and there are also other examples that we talked about in terms of designing alternative technologies for the sake of workers' own knowledge sharing, as well as solidarity building. Okay, I will just stop here.
I made a big mistake in my life, which was to tell everyone, yeah, I go last, and then they kind of cover everything I wanted to talk about. So I kind of wanted to summarize a little bit the three main things that we try to systematize as the three things that you can do with the digital workers inquiry, which is study the composition of the workforce, know who the workers are, so fighting back against the atomization and fragmentation that capital sort of imposes on us. And then the other one was understand the technological layer, the technology and the techniques that management uses to control workers and put them to work and extract value. And then number three, the choke points or the tactics that you can develop through research, at least in collaboration with research. But that's been covered, I think, quite a bit. So I kind of wanted to move to what we write in the epilogue. I couldn't remember the English word for that, which basically tries to wrap up a little bit the book by saying that we started writing this thing in 19, when you had this sort of excitement and buzz around what we call the tech worker movement. So several different sort of like grassroots efforts popping up across the world, really. Big strikes in delivery work in the UK, for instance, or those in China. For the first time, e-commerce, especially Amazon workers in Europe, but also in the States, sort of mobilizing at a scale, so to speak. The Tech Worker Coalition emerging as one of the sort of core institutions for a possible independent cross-sector, cross-class form of organizing within the tech workforce. So exciting stuff. But then since 2019, as we all know, things kind of changed a little bit, including the pandemic, Trump, the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, Gaza, genocide in Gaza, okay, smaller scale, but Google and other companies firing all the employees that had to do with EDI and rights beyond, let's say, just the technological layer, but more, this sort of imagining possible civil rights with being baked into technology. They got all fired. So the dream of using commercial social media as tactical media for organizing basically gone after the takeover from Musk and Trump launching his own, Truth social platform. And then, of course, the tech industry just aligned with American fascism and just like politically, let's say, joining Trump and the MAGA movement. Academia also not being immune to some of these transformations. So more censorship, more surveillance, more platformization, replacement of human labor, penetration of AI, more precarity with precarious and casual teaching staff and so on and so forth. And a lot of you will know this stuff very well. So we kind of find ourselves in this moment where we're like, okay, we're wrapping up this book. Some of the much more optimistic stuff we kind of wrote since 19. Maybe we should reconsider. So this is probably just food for thought for a possible conversation amongst us, but I kind of wanted to mention that at the same time, new stuff is happening that we just mentioned in the epilogue, but we feel that it's worth remembering that while some of the struggles that we kind of based our book upon may be fading a little bit, you now have other stuff like data workers in Kenya launching organizations, fighting for fair pay and mental health support, Chinese truck drivers going on strike, Whole Food workers in the States trying to unionize, Amazon finally being entered, with finally unions managing to actually win some votes in North America for the first time and unionizing some big FCs. Hollywood strikes against AI. So the Writers Guild and so on, for the first time, like a political action targeting AI specifically. The Tehiku Media Center pushing back against the use of, or the appropriation of the indigenous languages by generative AI companies. So I guess the point is that we are seeing, while we are aware that some stuff is gone and some of the optimism we kind of had a few years back may have been replaced maybe a little bit, new stuff is happening that makes us hope that these kind of action that, again, merges research and organizing can still be fruitful within a new tech worker movement that of which we're seeing the seeds right now, I want to say. And I'll stop here. Thank you.